I'd like to welcome everybody out there in the virtual world to the Cornell Labs 2024 FeederWatch Cam Party. It's our watch party. We've done a couple of these in the past, and people have really enjoyed the opportunity to watch birds, maybe take a break from the hectic schedule of the holiday season, and sit back with a group of people that also like watching birds, share some things about your lives, your birds, while we're sharing things about our birds. Hopefully, learn a little bit about birds along the way, learn a little bit about each other, and ultimately leave with a smile on our face thinking about birds. I'm Charles Eldermire. I'm from the Cornell Labs Bird Cams project. And joining me today are a couple of people who are experts in getting people involved in bird watching for science. Olivia Carvalho from Birds Canada and Heidi Faulkner, excuse me, from Project FeederWatch here at the lab. Welcome. If anyone in the audience has questions or comments, you can go ahead and share them in the chat. Our Bird Cams project lead, Ben Walters, is working behind the scenes in the chat. And while we can't always answer all the questions that get asked, we'll certainly try to keep it interesting and informative and get to as many of them as we can. So today we'll be watching the Cornell feeders, and I'm going to get the screen share going. But it'd be great to hear a little bit about, while I'm doing that, where you guys are watching from out there in the chat. And we're going to start today's conversation off with a little chat about sparkbirds. So share in the chat what your sparkbird is. Basically, if you're not familiar with that, sparkbird is like that bird or that bird watching experience that really sparked your interest in birds or got you into watching birds. So while I'm getting this screen share going and you're letting us know in the chat, let's hear from Olivia and Heidi. We'll start with you, Olivia, about your sparkbirds.
Yeah, thanks, Charles. I'm excited to be here. I love the Sparkbird question, although I don't feel like I have a super confident answer. I mean, I grew up knowing the birds in my neighborhood and like just loving seeing them around. Definitely felt very connected to cardinals. Every time we'd see a cardinal, my family would go, "Oh, there's my grandma. She's looking after us. She's following us in the car." But really, like my bird world expanded when I came to Birds Canada and I started working here. And my first spring that I worked at Birds Canada, the very first spring event that I went to was a woodcock event, so an American woodcock, or the Timberdoodle, as we affectionately call them. And this event blew my mind. Like I could not believe that 40 people showed up to watch the Timberdoodle do their nightly routine, the sky dance.
Oh, that's great.
As we all stood there, I was like, wow, this is, I didn't even know what a woodcock was before I had come to this event. And then we were all like oohing and awing and following that spiral as the woodcock came back down to the ground. And it really like it just left me with so much excitement that I couldn't believe that there was this whole other world I really didn't know about, and that each bird or each species have their own unique set of attributes and really cool stories to learn about. So that set off my motivation, and now I just love learning about my feathered neighbors. I think it's really cool
That's
to know who's hanging around.
That's great. You couldn't pick a bird with a cooler name than
True.
Timberdoodle, Woodcock. I think there's probably a half dozen names for them across their range because they're such interesting birds. I do want to point out before we jump to you, Heidi, do you recognize these two birds that are on camera right now? Because it's a little bit, it looks like almost a standoff, but they're not, it doesn't look like they're interested in each other. And I'm guessing these are some birds that we hear about in Project FeederWatch a little bit and sometimes get confused.
Like to me, I thought maybe two hairy woodpeckers. I don't know if you think they're the same size.
Yeah, I'm looking at them, and I definitely that one on the left. We can see when it's nice enough to male, you can see that red on the back of its head. When it's nice enough to turn its head to the side, you can see that pretty massive bill um, on the bird. But I think that guy in the back, it can be a camera can be deceiving. So this is part of the joy of watching birds, whether it's on our cameras or in your own, yard. Look at how big that bill is.
You know
Um,
what? Yeah, as he turns to the side, I can definitely see the difference in the bills. You're right.
yeah, so this is like one of those classics. So is this something that comes up in Feeder Watch a lot, Heidi?
Yeah, a lot of people asked, what's the difference between hairy woodpeckers and downy woodpeckers? And here you can see they're both turned the same way. You can see the difference in that bill size. They've also got a few other differences, but this size is one of the big things.
Yeah, is that something that these birds are also in Canada, right, Olivia? So this is something you probably get some feedback. Oh, and there's a titmouse that just popped in about Birds Canada participants as well.
Yeah, they're actually the downy and the hairy woodpecker were two of the top five reported species by Canadian feeder watchers last year. So it's really neat to see them side by side because identification can often be an issue, but Yep, hairy, you're looking for that longer beak. I always think of the downy being shorter,
That's
smaller.
yeah, and I think that's spot on. And I want to point out these titmice here are going after the peanuts. And titmice are like probably the smallest bird that we see come to the feeders and fly away with a peanut. You know, a peanut might be the size of its head. Yeah, like that one there. Um, so sometimes like all the activity on cam really gets ahead of me, and we're seeing lots of cool spark birds in the chat right now, from like, great blue herons and turkey vultures. I saw Eurasian blue tit, evening grosbeak. Oh, from Tammy. Hey, Tammy Hache. Tammy's our host for the Ontario FeederWatch cam, which if the activity dies down here, we might pop over to that camera. Carolina Wren, that's actually my spark bird. Oh, I love them. Heidi, what about you? I didn't want to leave you out of this spark bird fray. What got you interested in birds?
You're not gonna believe this. I was gonna say the same answer. So, my sister, who's a little bit older than me, she went to college first and took an ornithology course. And she was learning all about these cool birds and texting them to me. And she came home for winter, or I think it was spring break. And she said, we have the perfect habitat. We're surrounded by fields. We have to go try and find this really weird bird. It makes this funny little sound, like a peent. And so we were like, this is so weird. And it's really cold out, but we are so excited to do this. And we waited till sunset and we walked down our road and we're keeping our ears peeled. And we probably stayed there for about a half hour. And I was like, I don't know what we're trying to listen for here. And finally we hear it. And it's just the smallest peent. And then we start hearing the whole field just light up with all these noises. And just like Olivia mentioned, that really cool flight display. And I was just like overjoyed, like just the whole process of trying to find the bird. That I've been trying to chase that rush ever since.
It
I
is very much it's a treasure hunt in a way. These treasures are just all around us.
I love finding new birds. Like that really pushed me into like sort of a competitive nature to see how many new birds I can get because it's just such a thrill every time. But the woodcock really started it all.
So we've got two woodcock votes, a Carolina wren. We have South Island bellbird from New Zealand that just got put in the chat over here. Red-shouldered hawks. I mean, lots of mockingbirds, lots of really great. And we have people watching from all over the world. Spain, our our neighbor to the north from Canada. Lots of different states here in the U.S. New Zealand, as I mentioned. And so we're going to get into a few of your questions that are coming in the chat. I just wanted to make sure that our awesome experts that are here with us today have a moment as well to just share something about what you may or may not know something about there in the chat, which is Project FeederWatch. So Project FeederWatch is something that both of these people are working on that I'm talking with today in multiple countries. And Heidi, I don't know if you want to maybe dive in with an overview of what Project FeederWatch is and what your role in that is. And I might pop in and when I see birds and just mention them, or feel free to if you do as well.
Sure, yeah. So Project FeederWatch is a basically winter bird study. It goes November through April, and it's a study of birds in backyards, schools, nature centers, or wherever you watch birds. Many people participate with a feeder, but we want people to know that you can participate without a feeder too. Basically, we're in our 38th season of the study tracking winter bird populations.
Oh my gosh, 38 years.
Yeah,
So that's
38th
all the way you've been multiple millennia. This project's been going on.
It's crazy. We used to do paper data before the internet.
Oh my gosh. That's a
Yeah.
hard time to remember. And what's your role in FeederWatch?
So I'm one of the newer project assistants going on my third year. My role is a little bit of helping participants out with questions and protocol, answering emails, phone calls. I also work on parts of the website and I also manage our social media.
That's great. And as you've been talking, we've had probably like 6 or 7 species of birds visit the feeders, including those titmice, which have been very industrious. You can really tell they pop in. They're sort of a pale gray. There was one that had bands on it, if people saw it, or rings. If you're from places where they call them rings, it had a silver band and a white band on its right leg. So keep an eye out. Some of the birds are banded as part of just some long-term work that's done in sapsucker woods. And I should mention these feeders that we're watching are actually right at the Lab of Ornithology. So the Lab of Ornithology is in Ithaca, New York, which is in sort of smack dab almost in the middle of the state of New York. And we are part of Cornell University, but we're about 3.5 miles away from sort of campus. So we have, lots of birds that come in from a 200-acre sanctuary that surrounds the lab. And we're really excited to be watching goldfinches and downy and hairy woodpeckers. You can see a female red-bellied woodpecker, which we might be able to get a glimpse of her red belly there on the left side, and she's got a band on her right leg. So this is something else you can watch for on our cameras here because some of the birds are banded, which is kind of cool. And Olivia, Birds Canada obviously is involved in FeederWatch as well. Um, is there anything you can add to sort of why are we working all the way up in Canada as well, and what do you do as part of Project FeederWatch?
Yeah, absolutely. What's interesting about FeederWatch is it actually started on as the Ontario Breeding Bird Survey almost 40 years ago. And there was a realization that like more data was needed here to really understand winter bird abundance and yeah, what was happening for our winter birds and their populations. So the partnership from Cornell came out of that, and then FeederWatch just became a North America program, which has really given us a lot more insight. And now we have almost 4 decades of data that are informing like what is going on with our birds in the winter months. And it's a really unique program because it's winter specific. We often put a lot of emphasis on breeding birds and birds in the springtime, bird migration. But yeah, what about our birds that hang out all year? So this is a
Yeah.
really good program for that.
That's great. That's a really great reminder that, this project actually started up in Ontario, which is so cool. And I wanted to point out a bird. We've been talking about some of the flashier birds. Oh, he just flew away. There's a somewhat more drab bird. I'll try and get, oh yeah, there's one coming down in sort of the center right on one of the metal arms. We've seen these woodpeckers. They're all contrasty. We've seen our pale titmice and chickadees. There's a little group of birds that was foraging back there that I'll try and call out again. Wow, lots of chickadees all of a sudden. Um, but of course, they left as soon as I wanted to talk about them. So speaking of birds leaving, there were a couple of people that already popped into the chat here, and we got some questions about this ahead of time. They were actually remarking about the pine grosbeaks in Ontario, but it's come up in several other species in the chat. People are talking about or asking about, hey, I had this species of bird last year, but where are they? They're not here now. Like, what happened? And so you probably get, since it's coming out in this chat really soon, you probably get those kind of questions as part of FeederWatch as well. What kind of information can you share with people that help them understand about these birds and where they are?
I can take this one. Yeah, so sometimes a lot of birds come to your feeder, and then other days, like you see nothing, same between the seasons. And this can all be part of a ton of different things. We've got weather fluctuations, food about availability, habitat changes. Overall, unfortunately, birds are in decline. A lot of it is due to habitat changes, just the decline overall. But in some ways, food availability and weather fluctuations can change to make more birds come to your feeders rather than you see a lack of them. So it's all sort of dependent on different things. Other species, they have these cool eruptive years where, like, for us down in the United States, um, some of the more northern species from Canada will come down when there's less food availability up in Canada, more food availability down here. So really cool patterns to watch for.
And these are patterns, like you said, some of them are predictable, some of them are unpredictable. And so uh, when you think about the long lifespan right now of Project FeederWatch, if I'm worried about my dark-eyed juncos not showing up, but I'm contributing data through FeederWatch, like what's happening with those data? What does Project FeederWatch use our contributions to do? And would some of those answer this question of where do the birds go?
Right, yeah. Basically, it just overall helps us monitor those bird populations, and we're seeing where the birds are, where the birds aren't, and seeing it kind of helps us see which birds, if they're actually in decline or if it's due to other things. So it's really cool to look at the data that way.
And I'll just add to that. If you're feeder watching and you're like, man, my feeder is so quiet. We want to know. We want to know that there aren't birds at your feeder too. That really helps us paint an accurate picture. If you're a feeder watcher that does your count week to week, we want to know what birds are at your feeder, but also birds that aren't or birds that never come back. This really just helps us paint a more detailed picture so that data can be used, in informing conservation efforts down the road.
And I think it's a good thing to point out. Most of the time we can come up with good reasons, and most of the time we don't actually know. And so, these long programs that give us multiple years of data help us narrow the number of things we don't know about or increase the number of things we do know about, right? A couple of people have asked about the pileated woodpeckers here in Sapsucker Woods, and they're still out there for sure, but they're not coming to the feeders that much. And part of that is likely because there's a bunch of really good food out in the sanctuary right now. So there's been lots of trees that have been dying due to ash borers, among other things. And if I were going to come up with a hypothesis, I'd probably just guess, oh, there's probably some really good eating out there right now, and they don't feel like they need to come to a feeding station to do that. Ooh, there's a pretty male cardinal coming in there, that red bird. Hey, if you've got cardinals in your backyard, let us know in the chat. Or if you don't have cardinals, let us know what your brightest bird that comes to your feeder. Because around here, between the cardinals and the blue jays in the middle of winter, we feel pretty lucky. It's a pretty stellar bunch of birds to get coming day after day, colorful.
Yep,
Um,
I've been doing feeder watch, and right before the season started, I was having a male and a female cardinal come, and I haven't had them on my feeder watch count yet.
they do not want to be surveilled.
No.
Oh, there's our goldfinches. So if we look on the tube feeder in the back, you can see those birds that we think of as being bright lemony yellow in the breeding season. This is what they look like in the winter. And you can see they blend into the background so well, despite those still jet black wings, with the bright white wing bar. Um, and something that's interesting, I think, and does this, birds uh, are different in like how social they are, right? And is this something that you see in your feeder watch data that's submitted? Are you able to tell when birds are, so like I always seem to notice that goldfinches seem to come in groups. Is that reflected in the kind of data that you guys are receiving from your participants? Or, cardinals, there tends to be one or two, that kind of a thing. Is that the sort of patterns, those patterns hold up across all of your participants?
I would say so. Definitely big groups of chickadees, big groups of goldfinches, juncos, lots of mixed sparrow flocks.
I would say that the feeder watch behavior is pretty typical of their behavior outside of your backyard too. If they're birds that hang out together, they're probably going to come eat together. They're birds that hang out in a pair or solo. You'll probably see that as well. And I mean, it's dependent on the time of year. Like blue jays are always hanging out together more in the fall, I find. But right now I've got a pair of ravens that are hanging out around the tree in my backyard, which has been really exciting. But then there's also, mixed flocks of like starlings and sparrows and lots of chickadees hanging out in the birch tree. So you'll probably notice, and that's one of the fun things about feeder watches. Behavior is such an interesting part of getting to know the birds in your backyard. I mean, like the way that they either eat at the feeder or cache food, like really take the time to kind of notice what your birds are up to, because there's quite a big story going on in your yard for sure.
That's a great point, Olivia. Similar to how Heidi at the top was talking about how exciting it is to go sort of chase those new birds, all around. Sometimes it's just so cool to chase almost all the behaviors or ways to see your birds. So, we could talk a little bit about both in the chat. I mean, somebody mentioned having seen 20 plus goldfinches at their feeders, which would be quite a haul of goldfinches, right? And lots of reddish birds, purple finches, red finches, um, blue jays, cardinals. People are sharing a lot about what they're seeing in their backyards and around. And Tammy continues to thankfully answer a lot of questions about the Ontario cam out there. She did not know she was coming to be a volunteer in the chat, but thank you, Tammy, for your hard work, both taking care of the feeder situation at your place and being so free with your time and knowledge to be answering questions in the chat. We should get you an official hat when you're typing there. So you can think about, we'd love to hear from you in the chat as well. What makes a great spot to be able to watch birds or record birds for FeederWatch? And are there any particular things that you, for example, Olivia, that you really like to when you're watching birds, or particular kinds of feeders, or who's visiting? Who do you like to try to attract?
Yeah, I like to keep my setup pretty simple. I relocated to Northern Ontario, though not as far north as Tammy. I think Tammy's still like 8 hours more north than me. So if you've been watching the Ontario camera, that's like still a day's drive past me. But I'm really excited about this winter getting some different birds to my setup. There were some red poles hanging around. I'm really excited for when the grosbeaks eventually find me. But really, I like to keep a simple setup for 3 reasons. And the first is that it's convenient in the winter. I only really have 1, maybe 2 feeders that I'll put out because they're just easier to maintain. Like if I really want to be a responsible feeder, so I take those down every 2 weeks, wash them, put them back up, fresh seeds. It also can be expensive to provide bird seed in your backyard. So I find I don't refill more than once a day. Like I'll put out my seed in the morning, and when it's gone, it's gone. The birds know to come back the next day for a fresh offering. And then the other reason I really like to have a simple setup of just like 1 or 2 feeders is because it's really easy to feeder watch then. I'm not trying to watch too much at once. I have 1 vantage point that I'm kind of dedicated to. And right now I'm using a hopper feeder, which is the one that looks like a house where the roof tilts off and you can fill it up. It's got some support on both sides so birds can actually land to pick up the seeds. And then the one I have has 2 suet cages on the ends, which I really like in the winter because that's some really like high energy food to provide for lots of birds like it, but for me that's like blue jays. And the woodpeckers, I find they kind of gravitate towards the suet. So yeah, I like a simple setup that's really easy to clean, really easy to maintain, and it's enough for me to just watch 1 feeder at a time, I find.
So I'm hearing simple setup. I'm hearing not putting out too much food, but also providing some diversity of food, bringing in different species, and putting it someplace where you can watch it, both for fun and for data collection. And I think those are all really great things to keep in mind, especially if people are starting out. We have people talking about lots of bluebirds in their yards as well, red-bellied woodpeckers. Somebody who's new to birding, so just beginning to be able to distinguish species. I was going to call this out just a couple minutes ago. There was goldfinches and there were a couple of house finches on there. And it was just nice to see 2 sets of finches out there. But of course, a titmouse flew in and scared all the finches away. So I'll try and point them out when they come back. How about you, Heidi? Is there anything you particularly are fond of when it comes to setting up a place to watch birds?
So I have an interesting opportunity this year because we just moved into our first house. So I have a whole yard to do whatever I want to do to make it a better place for birds. So this year I've been focusing on, we already have a few bushes, but I want to put in some more in the springtime for it. We've got some brush piles going on, and I'm planning on putting out a heated bird bath so that the birds can have a drink. Basically, I'm trying to focus on a habitat of native plants and native features, natural resources, just so that I can attract as much birds as possible, even if like I have to take my feeders down. I definitely have a few more feeders than Olivia. Not as simple a setup, and I will say a little bit harder to clean my feeders as regularly. So I might have to downgrade to make that a little easier on myself, but we have this nice big window so that we have a good vantage point to see everything too. And I like to scatter a little bit of seed all over my ground so I get those mixed sparrow flocks next to my brush pile too. And that's working out really great.
That's awesome. And so, in addition to having a diverse setup of feeders as well and keeping them clean, as Olivia said, what I'm hearing is like thinking about the habitat around your feeders and how you can make a difference with um, whether it's living plant matter or things like a brush pile. If somebody was like excited to learn more about how to like different ways to think about setting up a feeding area, does FeederWatch provide any resources for them to use?
On our website, we have a whole page on landscaping for birds, so I can try and share that in the chat.
Okay, I'm sure Ben will be able to. I think we have that sort of queued up somewhere. We have a bunch of things. He'll share that in the chat.
Awesome.
Um, and then Olivia, it looks like you're about to jump in and say something there too.
Yeah, Birds Canada has a resource from a Canadian context called birdgardens.ca. And that website actually allows you to put in where you're located, and it helps you identify your planting zone. And then it has an amazing database that you can actually just sort for your zone and see what plants would do well there, and which ones to kind of attract yeah, birds, because birds love native species. So that's a great resource. And then I also say just like notice what trees around you birds gravitate towards. I really find the birch tree in my backyard. There's lots of chickadees that hang out there. But any native plant that provides like berries or seeds, I would encourage you to leave those in your fall garden cleanup, because they will provide amazing food sources over the winter. So we'll say delay your cleanup till spring. Don't worry about the seed heads and the berries and all of that. That's just more food source for birds.
I've actually I totally agree with that. It's also like nice to be lazy in the fall sometimes. There's enough other things to do. And to have a positive outcome from not like cleaning up the yard is always a nice thing. I've begun sometimes taking some seed heads and literally just like tying them onto my feeding station so that birds interact with them there where I see them. And I've even just sort of taken, you know, pretty supple branches that I've trimmed, from other places as part of my cleanup, and I'll just weave them around my feeding station. And it's really fun to like watch a bird fly in and just like land on a branch, and the branch is just moving, and they're just like checking out your feeding station, waiting to get on there. It's a fun thing to do, and the places to like slap oranges in the spring for the Orioles, and we hide peanuts in there for the Blue Jays.
You got a
Um,
homemade feeder setup. That's
yeah, I mean,
fantastic.
I've got feeders up there too, for sure, but it's just fun. Like I'm very much like I said, like you're chasing the birds, Heidi, and I do that a little bit, but like I really just love chasing the behaviors. Which if I remember right, like FeederWatch did start taking some behavioral data as well, right? Is that correct? Like maybe a few years ago?
Yeah, we've got you can report behavioral interactions, mostly things like if a bird displaced another or predated another.
Wow. Yeah. And
We
that
made
is
it a little bit easier to report on the app and website now too.
that's great. And are there any other new things that people can report as part of what's coming to their feeding area?
Oh yeah, you can now report mammals, which is so fun. However, it does have to be in the daytime, such as when you report birds, and you report them in the exact same way as our bird protocol.
Gotcha. I did see a squirrel in the background of the feeder set up here. There's still a couple of branches that we haven't trimmed because we had to move the feeding station a little bit this spring. And there's been at least one squirrel that continues to get on there. It's interesting. I don't know how many people out there who have feeders who are in the chat have issues with squirrels at your feeders. I actually love them. There's nothing more fun than watching a squirrel in the fall or winter, especially like grab a peanut or something and go hide it somewhere. Because they use their little hands and they just dig a little hole and they like they play pit a pat, like getting into a spot that but we see birds actually fly away with food as well. Like what's going on there, Olivia? Do you think there's could you describe what's happening when we're seeing these birds fly away with food?
Yeah, so you'll notice that quite a bit in the winter months, or as we're kind of getting into, if you're in a snowy place like I am, birds are stocking up. They want to make sure that they have lots of good food and some snacks for the winter. And really, like the food caching, you'll see with your chickadees and your nuthatches, your blue jays, Canada jays, they'll take it away from the feeder. They don't actually eat at the feeder. Think about your feeder as like they're doing their shopping. They're like stocking up on a few things. They're gonna take it home and enjoy it later.
Hold on 1 second. I want to see if everybody can hear this. There's a bunch of chickadees in the background and jays. I can hear it on my computer. I apologize if people can't hear it out there. I might not be able to make it that loud, but there's like at least 3 or 4 black-capped chickadees like DDDing up a storm, as well as a couple of blue jays. So I'm pointing it out only because sometimes your feeders go empty like this. And what might this be a symptom of? Any guesses out there in the audience? Or here with our expert panelists?
I don't think the folks in the chat can hear, but they said, thanks for describing. And we have some great guesses going on.
Yeah.
Hawk or a raptor above, predator is in the neighborhood.
Yeah, and so that's what I'm guessing right now. We are experiencing a little predator-induced pause in the feeding station. And that's actually a really exciting time. Obviously, for the birds is a little bit, it's a mortally exciting time potentially for the little birds. But this is something to notice at your feeders. If they've been really busy and then all of a sudden they're not, and you can hear birds making noise. I'm always up against the window, like, what's out there? You're like looking like what are they yelling at up there? Because it's often your best chance to see a bird like this, like a raptor. I'm not saying it definitely is, but Tammy brought up a shrike as another option. Even a cat or a mink. There are mink around the pond here. Anything that is could potentially be trouble. Sometimes that's the way you'll come upon it, is the birds are all hot to trot. Oh, and here comes Titmouse.
Charles, you mentioned,
sorry to interrupt.
No, I was going to build on that. You mentioned the call of the chickadees is what you were hearing right as everyone took off. And a fun fact about that call, that's the very distinct chickadee that I think lots of us will learn as young children, and that just sticks with you for life. The fun fact about that call is that chickadees will increase the number of Ds to indicate a higher level of danger. So if you're hearing more than, the typical chickadee, it's like a panic building up, warning everybody in the area. And that's why other birds will kind of eat or stick around with chickadees, as they really love that warning sign that comes with hanging out with them.
Just another fun fact to share with that is I actually caught many of the chickadees that were used in that experiment where they figured that out. That was back when I was in grad school in like 2000. A great colleague of mine, Chris Templeman, was doing that research 2 aviaries over from where I was doing research on chickadees. So I'm glad to know that people are well read, even decades old research that continues to be an interesting thing to look into, that people are still learning about. And a bird like a chickadee, which is everywhere, still hides mysteries, And this is why watching birds in your backyard can be so much fun. These are still wild animals, right? So building on that wild animal passion that these birds bring, we're watching woodpeckers here, right? We got 2 different species of woodpeckers on screen right now, eating 2 different kinds of food, right? Normally they'd be mostly eating insects out there in the wild. If I were starting out feeding birds, how would I learn? Are there resources that FeederWatch provides that might be able to help me figure out what kinds of feeders or food I might want to put out there, based even upon like birds that I hope to see?
One of my favorite resources that Project FeederWatch provides is our Common Feeder Birds interactive page. When you go on it, you can basically specify which winter region you're in. For me, I'd be in the Northeast because I'm in New York, and it'll show you a list of birds that'll be in that winter area. And when you click on them, you can see not only the food types that they'll enjoy most at the feeder, but the feeder types that they'll most likely come to, which is just such a cool feature. We've got almost 200 species on it right now.
That's so cool. And I like thinking about like, oh, what kind of birds like sunflower seeds? And if I really want to have evening grosbeaks, where do I need to be? What kind of food might I want to put out? I think that's pretty neat. And the fact that it's interactive makes it a really fun tool to use too.
Yeah, you can also filter by food type and feeder type to see, like, if you already have these things, what's going to come, which is
Awesome.
pretty cool.
And you were saying, Olivia, that Birds Canada has a resource for plants as well. Is any of that sort of related to potentially like what birds those plants might bring to your property?
We haven't got too much into that yet. It's still a fairly new database and continues to grow. There'll be more plants updated this winter. But I like to kind of think about what foods birds are looking for to begin with. You know, if you're thinking about birds that like those small seeds, those easy to get ones, then you maybe want to think about flowers that offer a seed head at the end of the season. I find across the board, if you're just getting into setting up a feeder, black whale sunflower seeds are the best ones to put out. They will attract the greatest variety of birds, kind of the best bang for your buck. They're also incredibly high calories or energy for birds in the winter. And then really like that's just gonna have the most fun for you. You'll have the most fun if you're putting out black sunflower seeds, I think. Like your chickadees, your juncos, woodpeckers, like everybody gravitates towards those at my feeder. So I find it more beneficial than a seed mix just to stick with the black whale sunflower. And then, you know, the suet has other elements to it. But peanuts are also a fun one to put out. Blue jays really like peanuts.
Yeah, for sure. And Tammy mentioned in the chat that this is Tammy Hashay, who's our cam host up in Ontario, at the Ontario FeederWatch cam, that she finds black oil sunflower seed is the most popular feed in her area, followed by peanut hearts. And you can see on the Cornell feeders here, we have the whole peanuts there, and then we have basically like a no mess seed mix, which is largely sunflower hearts with a few different nuts in it. And that's just because we feed so much to the birds that dealing with the amount of seed husks from the sunflower seeds was something that we were trying to avoid because it's sort of right in the prime viewing area of the visitor center. Oh, there's our goldfinch back in the middle, and you can see a chickadee with a pink and a white band, or a pink and a metal band, pink and white on the left leg there. So the cool thing is, like, when there's bands on these birds, you can actually tell if they come back. You know, that's one of the reasons why I like to keep an eye out for bands, because I might see that pink and white bird come back in, another multiple visits. Otherwise, I can't tell them apart, which is kind of amazing that the birds can tell themselves apart.
Hey, Charles, you brought up a good point about seed mixes and no mess. So I've had people reach out and ask if they can participate in FeederWatch if they don't have a feeder, and the answer is absolutely yes. I've also had people reach out and tell me they do it from their balcony if you're in an urban area. And well, that's totally possible to do. You can set up your count on a balcony. I just recommend that you check with your building to see if there's any restrictions on feeding wildlife from your balcony. And then you also want to think about where the waste is going, because maybe your downstairs neighbors won't really love that you're providing birdseed that has quite a bit of mess to it. So maybe a suet feeder would be okay in the winter months. But yeah, your black whale sunflowers with lots of shells and husks might not be so great for your neighbors. An alternative to that would be to go to a local area where there's birds present. I recommend, if you're going to a park, to just pick like one tree or two trees are together so that your count site is really easy to define. And then we're getting consistent data from you every time you go to that site. You know, you're not adding a tree each week or only going where there's birds. We really ask for consistency. So if you're going to do it in a local park or a wildlife area, be really consistent about what your site is. But yeah, totally possible to do without a feeder.
And that's a really good, empowering thing for people to remember. You might feel like you're kind of shut out of the fun of watching birds and recording them and helping, Project FeederWatch better understand bird distributions throughout the winter, but a feeder isn't actually the necessary part. Even having a yard isn't the necessary part. It's like being at a spot and consistently recording what birds are there. That's actually like the special sauce, right? Um, and so, what's the longest that you've ever had anyone doing feeder watch for? Does anybody do either of you know, like, is there a record for like the number of years that somebody has done feeder watch?
Offhand, I'm not sure if I know what the longest record is, but we've had plenty of participants email us and write to us and say, "Yeah, I've been participating for over 20 years," and I'm
Oh my
like, "That's
goodness.
really cool. That's a goal to me."
Yeah, I would
That-
say the same for me. I don't know what the longest running is, but I know that there's more than a couple people that have been doing it for well over 20 years, which is just amazing. That's an incredible level of dedication. So
Such valuable data
thank
too.
you.
and
Absolutely.
and I feel like it's like what a wonderful way to get to know the world right around where you are, you know? It's just that mindfulness. You know, mindfulness is something that we hear talked about as being important for mental health and wellness. And this is a way of being mindful and being purposeful about how you spend your time and observe. And it's beautiful. Tammy mentioned that she's at about 23 years of Feeder Watch. And in case you've joined late, we're here today. I'm Charles Eldermire. I'm from the Cornell Lab. Heidi Faulkner is also with the Cornell Lab with Project FeederWatch, and Olivia Carvalho is from Birds Canada, also part of FeederWatch and or part of the FeederWatch effort, I should say. Since we're about 40 minutes into a 60-minute planned watch party, I just want to make sure that anybody in the chat, if you do have questions, feel free to throw them in there and we'll try to keep up with what we're seeing. But I also wanted to point out that this question's come up a few times. Either being a beginner birder or not even necessarily being a beginner birder, but being aware of the fact that it can be challenging to ID birds. Are there any tools or resources that you guys would recommend as part of somebody's journey, either into bird watching or part of their, you know, self-education to becoming better birders, whether it's through feeder watch or other means? What kind of tools and resources would you recommend people stay abreast of?
Yeah, I can speak to this. Um, the first would be that I just want you to know you don't have to be an expert birder to enjoy feeder watch. If you're not a birder, but you're excited about birding or you're on the edge of being a birder, this is the perfect program to build out your ID skills because there's such a small group of birds. You're probably only seeing maybe 15 species. So you have this amazing opportunity to get really familiar with those same set of birds that are coming to your feeders all winter, getting really comfortable with their behaviors, knowing the difference between your hairy and your downy woodpecker, because you have this proximity to them that allows you to really take note of their details. I find birding in the spring is a whole different challenge because there's leaves on the trees. It's hard to get a good look at the birds. Feeder watching in the winter, it's so bare that you can really tell who is hanging around. So I'd say if you're new to birding and you're looking for some resources, the feederwatch.org website has great ID information. It also has a list of common birds that Heidi mentioned. And if you're looking for a little bit more help to get started, there's actually a free course available through Birds Canada. That's an introduction to bird ID. So there's lots of resources available, but one of my favorites is the Merlin app. I just think that's such a user-friendly app to start with. It also allows you to record bird sounds and then gives you a pretty educated guess on what you might be hearing. Again, like calls are just part of identification, and you'll start to recognize your chickadee and your blue jay and who's hanging out in your yard. So maybe Heidi can add to resources as well.
Yeah, we should note that you shouldn't report birds for feeder watch that you only hear, but you should report the ones that you see. But Merlin can really help identify the birds that you might be seeing. So And Olivia, remind me, do you guys also give your participants that poster when you sign up?
We do. I have it right over my desk here, so I refer to it most days. I've been referring to it on this call. But yeah, it comes in all of the welcome kits, or if you opted for a paperless, you got a digital version of it as well. Great background screen.
It's a double-sided poster of eastern and western common feeder birds. So that and Merlin are some of my favorite tools. And I have my own ID book, but Merlin can just be so much easier to pop up and scroll through and search for the bird you're trying to look for. It's very useful.
That's great. And we did get a question in the chat whether or not you can participate in FeederWatch outside the US or Canada.
To my knowledge, not at this time. The data that we're collecting is specific to the North American region. Outside of Canada and the US, maybe there are other monitoring programs or citizen science programs that you could get involved with. Currently, FeederWatch is not one of them.
However, there is, outside of FeederWatch, which is a very focused program, there is always the opportunity to, submit observations using EBird, which is a broader year-round bird recording project. So interested in birds all over the world. So even though FeederWatch may not be active where you are, I can guarantee eBird would give you the opportunity to sign up for an account and begin recording the birds that you're seeing around you. And it's a great way to, in a similar fashion to FeederWatch, to start to become more aware of those birds that are right wherever you happen to be. And with eBird, you can do it kind of wherever you happen to go or be. So rather than with FeederWatch being focused on one spot, consistently watching over time, eBird's concerned with kind of all of your birding observations wherever you might be, as long as we can stick a geographical point there and you can create a checklist. So if recording birds that you're seeing is interesting to you, I would encourage you to also check out eBird if FeederWatch is not available in your country. Let's see here. I'm just looking through the chat.
Merlin should be available worldwide too, right? So
That's correct. Merlin is available worldwide, and there are packs, basically like bird packs that you can download for different regions in different countries. So when it comes to, I'm just looking through the chat here, sorry, different kinds of foods. We talked about cleaning feeders being a really important part of maintaining a healthy place for birds to come eat, similar to like you wouldn't want to eat necessarily off the plates that someone else has used, right? A nice clean plate is a nice place to eat. Is there any guidance on cleaning feeders that you guys would want to share at this point?
Olivia mentioned it's a good idea to try to remember to clean your feeders every 2 weeks, if not sooner. 2 weeks is a little bit less of a hassle. But it can really help prevent if you've got a house finch with house finch eye disease or another affliction. They might sometimes try to rub their eye on the port, which is the little spot where their feet land. So when you wash that more frequently, it helps stop the spread of the diseases. Any specific tips from you, Olivia?
Yeah, I would say just having a routine around it is really going to be the best proactive approach. If you do notice a sick bird at your feeder, remove the feeder immediately. We don't want to, or don't want feeders to be spreading, and just kind of leave it down for a week or two, take note of what birds are hanging around, and then try putting it back up. Hopefully the bird sickness will have disappeared by then. My other thing that I just wanted to touch on is that we've been getting questions about avian bird flu. The best way to keep up to date with that information is to go to either of our websites, Cornell or Birds Canada, both recommendations from national government that we're following. But really, like the bleach solution, soaking your feeder, keeping it clean, cleaning up any mess or debris underneath the feeder as well. Yeah, you just want it to be, a 5-star restaurant, really.
Yeah.
And if you do have to take your feeders down because of seeing sick birds, you can still report birds even if you're not seeing any.
We did have a less common visitor that just popped onto the feeder that Melissa mentioned in the chat, dark-eyed junco. They're always around, but where do you guys have juncos at your feeders, Heidi or Olivia?
Oh my gosh, I have a flock of 10 that come every day along with a few sparrows, and they typically like to feed on the ground, but once or twice, very occasionally, I'll see one hop up to my platform feeder.
Yeah, that's
Juggles are on the list of the top 5 birds feeder watchers in Canada reported last year. Second under black-capped chickadee, we've got the dark-eyed, the slate-colored junco, followed by the blue jay, downy, and hairy woodpecker. So I think have we seen a blue jay today?
yes,
Yeah.
just a couple times they've popped in.
So we've seen them all. Top 5 birds for feeder watchers in Canada last year, all present with us here today.
We have one question from the chat here about someone who likes squirrels, but they still, and they feed them stuff, but they also like continue to ravage their feeders. And is there any guidance from Feeder Watch or from your personal lives? Doesn't have to be official Feeder Watch guidance about people who might love squirrels. How can they also maybe decrease the impact of squirrels on their bird feeding?
So, most of the time, people will have their feeders on poles that are stuck in the ground. A great way to prevent small rodents, squirrels, raccoons, is to put a baffle around your pole. And it really depends on the height that you need. It can be like 4 or 5 feet off the ground, depending. You'll just kind of have to watch your squirrels to see if they can still jump over it. But another great tip is to put those poles, if possible, about 10 meters or 3 feet from anything that they can jump off of. And that's really going to help your chances of preventing squirrels.
Yeah, the Cornell feeders that we're watching right now, that platform is about probably 5 feet off the ground, and there's multiple poles supporting the platform, and we have, I think, 12-inch baffles, because we wound up over time attracting what might have been the biggest raccoon I've ever seen, and he managed to get up and around baffles that were on the pole that were smaller. So uh and squirrels, I always think about the squirrels as thinking like if you had 12 to 15 hours a day to just stare at a bird feeder setup and try and figure out a way to get on it because you're hungry and you're fuzzy, like that's what squirrels do. And so like even though you might have thought you did everything, like the squirrels are really good at finding the gaps in your thought, in your thought process. So definitely sounds like baffles are a good choice, staying out of their jumping range. Anything else to add?
Nope. If you figure it out, let us know.
Yeah, and so that's the thing with this, even with the feeders that we're watching, because we had to move about 5 feet or so, it just put us into range of this other tree. And I've been like selectively cutting off branches that have made it progressively harder. So they're on it much less, but I think there's still one daredevil that manages to get on there.
It's too
Um,
funny to watch them go up the baffle and they come out the other end and they literally look baffled. It's very well named.
That's funny. So we can see there's a couple of goldfinches just enjoying the no mess feed in the tube feeder there. Um, if the pond didn't have ice on it, we might see some geese or some ducks in the background. There's both Canada geese as well as some mergansers that hang around this time of year. Sorry about that if that was something weird. Um, is there Is there anything in thinking about the data that have come into FeederWatch that you guys are aware of? Um, would there be anything, could you point at anything unusual that's come in over time? Either unusual species, unusual numbers, anything like that that have been reported by your participants?
A good question, but it's not one I think I have an answer for. This is my first season coordinating Project FeederWatch in Canada. I took over from Carrie, who was here for many, many years and would probably have some great insight to this question. But yeah, Heidi, do you know of any that's coming to mind?
I know of a few basically rare bird reports we've seen on some submissions here. We actually used to have an old page on our website with all the rare reports, but all I can think of is in recent history, someone down in North Carolina, I think, had a red cockaded woodpecker. It's I think that's the species I'm thinking of. It's an endangered woodpecker that looks kind of similar to a hairy or downy, but they have a little bit more white on their cheek. And it was just so cool that this guy got to see it at his feeders, especially during feeder watch. And he actually sent in pictures so that we could put that on our website and talk about it a little bit. And for me personally, I guess, so I'm up in Ithaca, New York area, and we have a very high elevation feeder. And for some reason, we have a Harris sparrow visiting who is supposed to be in the Midwest. And I was delighted that he actually keeps showing up on my feeder watch days. So I get to keep reporting him too.
That's great. Well, and I think about the people, there are some hummingbirds that are common sort of off-track migrants. So I'm thinking mostly of Rufus, but every once in a while there's one that, might show up in somewhere in New York or even in southern Canada, right? And that would still be a bird that could be counted in a feeder area, right? Of course, there are places it's hard to imagine looking out, the window here at the ice on the pond, but there are places where there are hummingbirds probably normally on feeder watch counts. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, there's actually one species that if you're on the very west coast of Canada out in British Columbia, you probably have an Anna's hummingbird during the winter in the southern part of the province. But yeah, that would probably be a shock to most other Canadian feeder watchers that there's a hummingbird hanging around in the winter.
Yeah. Um, the other thing I'll say is, it is just a really neat thing when I think about feeder watch. Like I think I'm not sure if Heidi or Olivia, I'm not sure which of you said this, but you said, a lot of attention's often spent talking about migration, talking about breeding, talking about birds in those contexts. And the winter scope of feeder watch, I think, is a great like way to reframe these winter months where, at least for most people, certainly for me, the world of birds narrows quite a bit, right? That diversity of birds. And I wondered, is there anything in your or anybody out there in the audience, is there anything that when feeder watch is right around the corner, anything you're looking forward to in particular about that oncoming feeder watch season?
Yeah, I can speak to this. I love Feeder Watch because it's just such a good reminder to slow down. And what makes it different from other citizen science programs for me is that it's really a mindfulness practice. It's your opportunity to sit down once a week, take note of who is visiting your yard or your count site or your feeder, and to practice slow birding, that it isn't competitive or just taking note of what's happening. It's stationary. And it's a really meaningful contribution to science and conservation. Like your data is coming and it's going to inform so many other things that we get up to at Cornell and at Birds Canada. But it's really cool that you get to be a part of that from home, just by telling us about the birds that you're seeing. So I think that's really special that it not only grows your bird ID skills and your familiarity with birds in your neighborhood or your area, but also that it's a direct contribution to some pretty awesome conservation efforts going on internationally.
Those are great points. Anything you'd like to add, Heidi?
I just get so excited for feeder watch because if you're someone like me who kind of has a hard time getting out of the house in the winter, it's just something cool you can do like from your couch. It's like something to look forward to when it's just kind of a dark, dreary season and you've got the birds. The birds are always there and it's a nice way to spend the winter.
That's a really great point. And I know for me, in my neighborhood, when I walk around, people know I work at the Lab of Ornithology, and they save their bird stories to share with me, or their bird questions typically. And one thing that can really unite, or sort of like harmonize our bird expertise is sort of this nexus, especially of winter birding. The birds that really are traveling through all of our backyards almost equally in this, like in my little neighborhood anyway. We don't have giant changes in habitat, and we're all kind of seeing the same species. And I can share a story about a group of chickadees or Carolina wrens, or they can share something with me, and it's just a different way that we can relate together and sort of share that joy of both observing, sharing, and having some community around the birds. So, well, we're up to the limit here. It's 2 o'clock. I want to thank Heidi and Olivia for spending an hour with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Charles,
Carl.
thanks for having us. And I just want to say we're so grateful to our amazing sponsors, Armstrong Birdseed, Wild Birds Unlimited, as well as Cornell and Birds Canada for coming together and keeping this program alive for almost 40 years. And the biggest thank you, of course, to all the people that submit data, the tens of thousands of you every year that send your counts to us and tell us about the birds in your yard, in your area, and just feel so connected to them. It's really special to be a part of. So thanks so much for having me today.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming, Olivia. And Heidi, it's been great hearing about FeederWatch and your yard. I'm jealous of your Harris's sparrow.
Thanks so much for everything, Charles. And thank you for everyone who came to watch today.
Awesome. Well, have a great holiday season wherever you are, whatever you celebrate. I think we can all agree it's worth celebrating birds and sharing birds and enjoying them together. So thank you all for coming, and go out there and see some birds and share them with people. And thanks for taking the time to share the time with us. All right. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Okay, we are